Street good. Who you gonna call?
So this project is a little bit of a riff on Ghostbusters, and I wanted to play that first line. If there's something strange in your neighborhood, who are you going to call? And in our case, it would be Peakbusters. And for the purpose of this conversation tonight, there's something strange in our neighborhood are fossil fuel peaker plants. And so I would like to introduce our two speakers tonight, the Reverend Kendra Ford, who is also a climate organizer for 350 New Hampshire, and Nathan Phillips, who's a professor of Earth and Environmental Sciences at UMass. And I'm very pleased to let you all know that these two folks have been friends of mine for several years, as we have explored options for trying to make a cleaner future for New England. So I'm going to stop sharing and turn it over to Kendra.
Thank you. It's delightful to join you all for this conversation and for the latest phase of the No Coal, No Gas campaign. So we're talking about peak busting today, but I thought before we arrived at peak busting, I would tell you a little bit about the No Coal, No Gas campaign, where Mary Beth and Nathan and I and lots of other people around New England have been working on ending fossil fuels and creating that next future for ourselves. So I'll show you just a few pictures from No Coal, No Gas. Nathan might share them. I can, if it's working for you to share them, Nathan, that's great. And if it doesn't work out, I can try here. I am actually at a 350 New Hampshire staff retreat for a couple of days while we get ourselves focused and gathered up for the next phase of our work. I think all of us are feeling it these days that the new challenges around us are asking us to have some new goals and some new tactics. So that's the work that I'm doing in the background, while the there we go. So No Coal, No Gas really started as a campaign to shut down the last coal burning power plant in New England, in Bow, New Hampshire. Some of you have worked on that plant over the years. So that's the very tangible, very local thing that we got started on. And the first picture in this slide deck after this invitational one is of our first mass action at that coal plant. You can see the smokestack in the background. And you can see that we said they wouldn't stop burning the coal. We would carry it out bucket by bucket. And in the next picture, you can see us walking down the train tracks with our buckets to do just that. And that's been part of the No Coal, No Gas campaign from the beginning. How can we find really tangible places to put pressure on the system to change? And so you can see that we try to do it in community every step of the way, and that's one of the first goals and first organizing principles, and just the way we do things. We do it as a community building process. And we also try to get it, imagine something a little bigger than is comfortable, so that we can really show something that's possible out there, not a sort of small steps thing, but let's imagine big for ourselves and then share that sense of possibility beyond our particular actions. And I think that the next picture is of another action that we did at the coal plant, when we some people made a little space in the asphalt in front of the plant, the driveway, and planted some local plants or some native plants to say, there's another world is possible here. This land could be something different. So that showing of what's possible, and that you can't see the banner too well behind them, but it says tear it down. But at the same time that it said, tear down the coal plant, it was also showing that we could make something else. We could do something else. We could have another way together. And of course, just over a year ago, the coal plant announced a shutdown date. The official shutdown date isn't for a couple of years yet, but they have continued to, even as Trump said they were going to support coal again, the Merrimack generating station has said, nope, we're going to continue to our renewable energy park. It's still not clear what a renewable energy park is, but it does seem like they're pretty committed to not burning coal in the near future. So that's the most tangible piece of the campaign that we came out of, and I know that some of you have participated in those things with us, and in some of the actions in the background on that. So when we got that shutdown date, we said, okay, we shut down one peaker plant in New England, one plant that just turns on when energy demands are high. It's really hot and it's really cold. There are 60 some more of them. Maybe we could do it again. Maybe we could just shut them all down. And we've realized that we've had to think a little differently about that. And we're still figuring out how to do 60 all at once. So we started with one of the other plants, well, actually all the other plants that are in New Hampshire. And this picture is of the largest one, which is in Newington. It's right next to the Schiller plant. I know lots of you have worked on Schiller over the years. So this is Newington, and this is the banner that we dropped off of it just about a year ago. Is that right? Is my time right? Terrible sense of time. So this was how we sort of announced, okay, now we're going to close all of these plants that are these peaker plants. They just turn on occasionally. They're really inefficient. They're really dirty. Most peaker plants are located in communities that struggle to resist their harm. People of color, low-income communities are disproportionately affected by these plants. And so that's another urgent reason to shut them down. So that's our, that's how we got from Bow to this bigger project. We could see that we needed to work on all of those plants, and that we needed to prove that we didn't need them. And the way we can prove that we didn't need them is a thing that we all learned in the pandemic, which is to shave the peak as demand, in this case, as energy demand goes up, to just not let it go up so high. And so that's when peak busting comes in. And I think that Nathan will give a little more of the background about some other parts of the campaign. But the shaving the peak just means when we can see that the electrical demand is going up and that they're going to turn on these peaker plants like Newington, like White Lake in Tamworth, and then others across New England. We figured out, well, what if we just all use a little less at those times? And if we do it together, it's more fun, more creative, more enjoyable, and we can continue to build community and essentially carry the electricity out bucket by bucket and not need those peaker plants. And then we can begin to build that next future that we want. So peak busting means lowering that peak, getting rid of that highest spike in demand, and we've been practicing it. And I think Nathan can talk a little bit more about what those practices have been like. So we're going to learn more about how the whole system of getting electricity to us works. We're going to do it in community. And then we're going to build the ability to respond when we know that peak is coming, be able to say, oh, we know we can reduce that demand. We're not going to just let it happen. We know we can take action to change it. One of the entities that needs to know it's possible to do that is the electrical grid operator, and that's a piece that Nathan will talk a little bit more about. So I think when we show them it's possible, then I mean, I agree with you, iPhone. I'm seeing the comments come up in the chat. And maybe Nathan can talk a little bit about how we can do it for not just for fun. Although, you know, maybe we decide that doing it for fun and to change the world together is pretty good. But that does point us into being able to change the whole system when we get to understand things together and make choices together, things already begin to shift. And I think that's the power of doing this peak busting project together, having lots of people do it together, tell each other what we're doing, keep it fun, and make sure that we're doing it together, not just each in our own houses. So you might have, when you know there's going to be a peak, you might have a picnic. You might do something with your neighbors. You might just tell each other by texting or something what you're doing so that we remember that we're doing this together and that collectively we are shaping something. And I mean, maybe you have a community viewing of Ghostbusters just to to keep it joyful, because it's really important that it be joyful. Figuring out about electricity isn't always joyful. It's important. And if you can have the two things together, important work and joy, then that's the magic. I think that's the pieces that I want to talk about before I pass it to Nathan. Unless, Nathan, you think of anything that you were expecting me to talk about before you jump on.
I don't think so. That was a great introduction. Let's see, just making sure that can you all hear me and see me now? Okay, great. And maybe if there's any clarifying questions for Ken, could just maybe see if there's any before I add my little complimentary piece.
I should say, I'll also look at the chat. And if there's anything there that I can respond to, I will answer questions in the chat.
Okay, great. Okay, well, I wanted to just start off by foregrounding something really very important to this effort to do peak busting, and that is our commitment to inclusion, community care, and that strategic conservation of electricity is not about like austerity or deprivation, but it's about having each other's backs. When we talk about conserving electricity, we know that for some people, like they have to cook a meal during the peak. That's their family situation requires it. They might be on an oxygen machine. There's no way we are wanting to have people deprive themselves of the things they need to, live their lives comfortably. And as Kendra mentioned, if we can make this fun and joyful as we build community, that's really what we want to do. So yeah, I just wanted to start there. Now, I think the No Coal, No Gas campaign, which is where I met Reverend Kendra, I believe it started in 2019, and I joined it a little bit later, like maybe a year and a half into that campaign. And that's where I met Kendra and others. And I came in with the understanding that the goals of this campaign were to build community, to show what's possible, and to shut down that last coal-fired power plant in all of New England that didn't have a shutdown date. What I didn't realize, and I learned from folks like Kendra and Marla Markham, another dear friend and organizer, was that to shut down that single power plant in Bow required us to engage with the grid operator, the so-called ISO New England, that stands for Independent System Operator of New England. They're the grid operator, they're the grid planner, and they're the grid market auctioneer all in one. They are governed only by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. And I didn't really realize, but we had to essentially engage with that entity if we wanted to understand how and why, how we could shut down the Bow coal-fired plant. And as well, as we've won that shutdown date, how we need to work with and in opposition, frankly, to the status quo that is being pushed by the ISO New England to shut down all of these peaker plants across New England. So I wanted to just talk about that for a little bit. And so I think it was I want to just share with you that by way of a couple stories and anecdotes, and the wind has picked up here. I'm in Sacramento, by the way, and I hope it's not creating some audio problems, but let me know if so. I think it was in about October of 2022 when our engagement level with ISO took a whole step up. And I got a phone call from one of the organizers of the No Coal, No Gas campaign saying, hey, the ISO New England, this New England grid operator, 6 states of New England, they have this publicly elected body that is recognized by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. And they told me the name of this entity, never heard of it before. It was called the Consumer Liaison Group. You probably never heard of it either, some of you. And so I was, like, what is this thing? And it's a body that is mandated by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission to link communication, to liaise between ordinary electrical ratepayers, like everyone probably here, and myself included, and the board of this ISO New England grid operator. And it's been this kind of like industry dominated coffee klatch, as one of the people involved, Don Kreis, who is the ratepayer advocate for New Hampshire, by the way. You should all look up Don Kreis. Don is an elected member of this body, the Consumer Liaison Group, CLG. The coordinating committee is the only elected body associated with the ISO New England that is publicly elected by every single ratepayer, everyone on this call. If you live in New England and you are a ratepayer, you can vote for and be a member of the Consumer Liaison Group. So Reverend Kendra and myself were invited to run for this body in 2022. And as part of a slate, we ran, and this insurgency campaign swept out the industry dominated folks who were on that body. And we are now in there. We're a body of, I think, 13 or 14 across all of the states of New England. And we have learned so much about how the grid operates. We have striven to create a more democratic, like energy democracy, to open up the channels of communication so that ratepayers who are fed up with high rates, unfair rates, fossil fuel and pollution expansion can actually voice their desire for change and their demands for change directly to the ISO New England. So that's one of the ways in which we're organizing. And that's one of the ways that we learned about the power of peak busting, the potential of peak busting, as well as the fact that it's hardly being done. And so it's an opportunity for all of us, and it's being ignored. And so that's one of the reasons why we really want to push forward on this. Now, and just to illustrate the potential that we all can have, there's about 6 million of us ratepayers across the 6 states of New England. And if a fraction of us worked together in a concerted collective fashion, and we knew ahead of time, like 24, 36, 48 hours ahead of time, which we do know that there's going to be a heat wave or there's going to be a really cold snap, and it's going to be 6 to 8 p.m. where everyone is cooking and doing this and that, using the demand for electricity. If we can see it coming and enough of us can do modest things to reduce our electricity demand, to shift our electricity demand away from those, it could be as much as 1 hour that is a peak, that if we avoid, we can prevent and preempt those dirtiest of the peaker plants, the oil and the gas. There's no more coal. It's phasing out. We can prevent those dirty peaker plants from turning on. So that's the whole idea. And just to give you an example, shortly after Kendra and myself and others were elected in as a slate to this consumer liaison group, that December, it was December 24th, 2022, it had an infamous name known as the Nightmare Before Christmas. It was also the 7th night of Hanukkah. Okay, that late December 2022. What happened was that it was colder than anticipated by the weather forecasts and the day ahead weather forecast. And by the way, it turns out that the ISO New England's weather forecasting is not as good as the National Weather Service or NOAA. They're a little bit less accurate, so they can get off by a few degrees. And it was a few degrees colder on December 24th, Christmas Eve, 7th night of Hanukkah, than it was expected or forecast to be. And as you know, on a night like that, at 6 to 8 p.m. or so, that's prime time for people cooking with electricity or using all kinds of appliances at that time. And so what happened on that evening is we had a red alert across all 6 states of New England. There is an app, we'll pop in the website where you can get the app. It's called ISO2Go. You can look on your phone at real time, or you can go on the website iso-ne.com and look at their maps and their charts, and they will show you every 5 minutes. It's like a dashboard, a real-time dashboard. Here's what the wholesale prices of electricity are right now, the last 5 minutes. And here's what we're expecting demand to be over the next 24 hours. It's fairly, some parts of it are intuitive, some parts of it are completely bizarre and hard to decipher. But the color-coded maps and the prices, the red alert, we saw that on that night. Now, the math that we did was that instead of the way the ISO New England solved that problem, which was by turning on a bunch of dirty oil and gas power plants, a lot of which basically failed as well, by the way, because freezing valves and other problems turning on those power plants. The math that we did was that if on average, every one of those 6 million ratepayers across New England, not everyone, but on average, reduced their electricity demand during that peak hour, that was the red alert hour, by the equivalent of turning down like your microwave oven from high to medium for an hour, we would have completely neutralized the entire grid emergency. And so that's a modest reduction in electricity and so-called shaving the peak busting that we know we have the potential to do. Now, is it realistic that we're going to get 6 million of us all to do that? not necessarily in the short term, but our goal is it's the same goal that we started with in No Coal, No Gas. Show what's possible. If enough of us can show that by working together, by being connected together, it could be virtual like this, it could be in person where we have a picnic or a outing at the same time that there's a peak when we're more local together. Um, if we can show that it's possible, then what that does is the ISO has to recognize that, hopefully acknowledge that, and then, you know, what's possible there? Could City Hall dim its lights strategically, or pre-cool or preheat some spaces the hour before and kind of coast through the peaks? Could the Walmart or the Home Depot or the big box store uh, like do a little reduction, preheating, and then coast through the peak? What's possible for a lot of bigger entities to learn from the example that we're setting? So that's what we are intending to do with the peak busting. Right now, we're practicing. I'm an educator. I work at Boston University. I teach and do research there. And learning by practice is something that's taken me decades to learn is actually valuable, because a lot of times people say like doing the same thing over and over again doesn't have value. I'm actually learning that doing the same thing over and over, like practice, actually does have value. And so we are practicing every Thursday through this summer peak from 6:30 to 7 p.m. It's just a half hour. And we are together because it is likely to be the kind of peak time during the summertime is around that time period, maybe extending a little bit later into the evening, but we're just getting together 6:30 to 7 p.m. and we're sharing with each other like on a Zoom or a Signal or text chat. You know, what were you able to do to shed a little bit of electricity? Or if you weren't able to, that's totally fine too. What kind of help could the rest of us do to have your back because you did need to use electricity? So it's forming community. It's doing it with joy and care, mutual care. And we invite you to all join us. You know, these are practices that are timed every Thursday, 6:30 to 7, right? This is practice because when actual heat waves do come or very, very cold snaps come, we might only learn about it 24 hours to 36 hours ahead of time. And so there's a level of intermittency and kind of like an alert goes out. And so we're practicing for when it becomes a real value to the resiliency of the grid, to saving lots of money, you know, affordability of the grid, and to keeping our grid clean. There are going to be those times. It could be, you know, August 8th at 7 p.m. We might all hear that like 24 hours ahead, hey, there's going to be a super peak because it's a heat wave and we're expecting it. So that's when it really counts. So these Thursday evening sessions are just practicing on a regular basis and getting us ready for when it actually matters in a big way. Now, we're always saving energy even when we're doing this on Thursday, 6:30 to 7. So it's a really good thing anyway. And that is when the peaks tend to happen. But we're also practicing for the times in which we might not know a whole lot ahead of time, except for maybe 24 hours that we need to practice this. So we want to invite you all to join us. You know, just the last comment is, you know, one thing I've learned from being a member of this consumer liaison group and having a kind of a front row seat, actually not to all of what ISO New England does. There's a lot of behind the scenes stuff that, you know, we're not privy to seeing. But we've seen enough of it to see that they are committed to the status quo. They are committed to business as usual and incumbent generators, keeping them happy, because that's where they get their funding. They get their funding from an industry collective group called NEPOOL, the Northeast Power Pool. And you know, the profit motive makes it such that the ISO New England really incentivizes a scarcity economy like when there's scarcity and there's super high demand, that means more profit for some of the entities. And they, by the flip side of that, the ISO New England currently, like in a way, punishes abundance. Abundance is conditions when we have so much sun and so much wind on the grid, and it's just there in droves. And this is where I saw floating by in the chat, someone said sometimes the prices of electricity go negative. Negative prices on the grid. And this is often when there is an abundance of sun and wind. If you think about that, that is not only not valuing sun and wind, it's like devaluing it. It's treating the cleanest energy as if it's like trash that you put out on the step and you pay someone to take it away. That's actually the way renewable energy is being treated. So we need to change that model. And peak busting is one really powerful way to do it. You know, this so-called demand response, which is what we call peak busting, that's their technical jargony term for it, demand response. It fits renewables like a hand fits a glove, because the big knock on renewables you hear about is it's intermittent, you know, but the peak, we can also dynamically work with the grid with peak busting to complement the wind and the sun. So I'm very excited about it. Thank you for having the opportunity to share with us. I'm gonna pause there, whether Kendra has anything further to add, or maybe back to our host. Yeah, but thank you.
I have a question. I have something to add, and then Nathan and Kendra, if you could expound upon that. The focus of this conversation so far tonight has been simply on reducing our electricity use, because then we have fewer fossil fuel plants spewing less carbon into the atmosphere, less methane, whatever it is. In addition to that, each of these peaker plants basically gets a retainer just to hang around and be available. And we as ratepayers pay these retainers. And so there are a bunch of these plants that sit around and get paid a bunch of money, even if they never run. And while we don't want them to run, we also don't want to have to pay them to sit there and do nothing just in case. And if we can prove to ISO that citizen demand response is enough to make up for several of these, then what we want ISO to do is to not give these fossil fuel peaker plants their retainers, thereby saving us some money.
Kendra, would you like?
Yeah, I don't know if we have any actual numbers.
I believe, go ahead.
No, you go ahead, Nathan.
Okay, so I'm not going to have the number, but I believe that all of those peaker plants, they participate in what's this market. It's called the forward capacity market. Forward means it's going into the future. Capacity means there's some plant that says, hey, we've got the capacity. If there's like a crunch on the grid, high demand, you call on us, we can turn on. But they get paid every month, whether they're turned on or not. And I believe if you add it all up, this market, this so-called insurance policy market, it's like hundreds of millions of dollars a year. Do I have that right, Reverend Kendra?
It's a lot.
Yeah. And this is with almost zero peak busting or demand response. I can tell you this, okay, like just to give you an idea of how the example of how much we could, as ratepayers, have put a dent into these big demand spikes, like I shared. The fact is that you know, currently these are really big numbers, but the peak demand across all, if you add up all the demand at the highest demand period ever across all 6 states of New England, it's like 27 gigawatts. of electrical power. And of that 26 gigawatts, that's composed of nuclear, gas plants, solar, wind, everything, including demand response. There is a little bit of demand response that participates in the ISO market because they can provide that peak shaving. It's confined to commercial and industrial customers. There's essentially no residential or retail demand response. So you and I are all shut out of that. But even the commercial and industrial, which could be huge, represents, I think it's like 350 megawatts instead of compared to 26 gigawatts. So what is that, like less than 1/100th or so? It's almost virtually unused at all. So huge opportunity to cut into that forward. And by their rules, it should be that the principle of a penny saved is a penny earned. Like saving electricity should have as much impact and fairly participate in their market as a peaker plant turning on. If you save 100, kilowatts versus producing 100 kilowatts, it should have the same ability. So, being able to have that impact in the ISO we want to show what's possible in that regard. And there's a lot that's possible.
Maybe it's Merrick has asked a couple questions about this, like why do this social demand response when the technology is available to do demand response? And we do know some folks who have smart thermostats in their homes that people can opt into that. But the grid operator has said that they themselves can't. And I find every time I try to explain this that I agree with what do you mean by it's too difficult? The grid operator says that, people won't do it, or people think it's too difficult, or they won't respond, or the grid operator has a lot of kind of vague excuses about why they couldn't possibly do that. But you're right. There are smart meters available. There are all kinds of other smart appliances that could be connected to the grid and people could opt in to have their whatever turned down or turned up when there's peak demand. And some utilities are engaging in that, but the grid operator is kind of steadfastly refusing to be part of that. And so that is why we're just trying to show them what's possible, and trying to show them that the culture that they're assuming is not accurate, that they're assuming that people aren't interested, that people aren't willing. And we know that lots of people are. Some people aren't, some people can't. Yes, but there are a lot of people who are willing and ready. And so we want to shift the kind of assumptions underneath how the whole grid gets put together.
I want to comment on that, and then we'll get to Felix's question. So I have been to several of these consumer liaison group meetings where they have question and answer sessions, and I have asked them, why don't they implement a consumer demand response program? For example, California has implemented one. So we know it's possible, but the ISO New England folks, I was there in the room, so was Kendra. They said something like their remit is to keep the energy on at all times, and they don't feel that there is the attitude or the stomach of people in New England to want to conserve. And it's ISO's job to give them as much energy as anybody wants anytime. And that's part of the peak busting project, in my view, is to show ISO New England, that maybe that was their remit in the 1960s before the 70s oil crisis or something. Well, even though ISO didn't exist in the 1960s, but that their attitude is not quite reflecting a lot of the attitudes of the ratepayers of New England, who are increasingly caring about conserving energy. And now I think, did anybody want to answer Felix's questions about, can you elaborate on what you mean by they don't show up on consumer pricing, like it's a fixed cost that's already factored in?
Yeah, like we don't have, I don't think there's anywhere in New England for residential retail where we have time of use pricing, where during very peak demand periods, the price would go up, and that there's an incentive for people to consider to shave the peak. If there were like that could be a really important lever. Like it's a little bit like congestion pricing, which has worked out quite well in New York City for cars. But you also have to be very careful to not essentially punish people who don't have the income level to be able to afford it. Like, the worst case scenario you'd have is time of use pricing, where the price goes way up when there's a demand, and a low income person that is on an oxygen machine is getting basically penalized heavily for no thing that they could actually control. So though time of use pricing has to be done with inclusion and justice involved.
Regarding the app, and I also think that's part of how California, CAISO is the California ISO. They have an app that people can download the app and participate in. And we had a guest speaker from California ISO come and talk to us about this. And unfortunately, ISO New England didn't want to seem to use California ISO as a mentor to follow their lead.
If I could add to that as well, or Kendra, did you have something to share? Yeah, so interestingly, if you look at the California ISO website or their app, they have these things called flex alerts. That's the thing that they call peak shaving. And they will send out these alerts, not only for like serious conditions on the grid, like there could be rolling blackouts or whatever, but in fact, their language says to save money and for environmental benefits. So they're actually sending these alerts out, not just for like the operational security of the grid, but for reasons of the environment and saving money. And it's so interesting because the ISO New England has said to us that we can't promote conservation of electricity because it's like putting a thumb on the scales of the market and the auctions, because a demand response resource, that they look at that as like in their view, it'd be a company, it'd be a corporate entity. And these things do exist. They aggregate, residential consumers, electricity consumers. There's one out in California called Ohm Connect. And then they bid into the market. So they're like any other resource. And so the ISO has this kind of like thing where it's like, well, if we started promoting conservation of electricity, that would actually put a thumb on the scales of this supposedly completely neutral auction and market. So we're not buying that. And the Cal ISO shows that like they're FERC regulated too. They're a regional transmission operator and they're able to do it. So we should in the ISO New England as well.
So hi, this is Susan. Joanne, I see you had a couple good questions. Do you want to unmute and ask them?
Oh, hi, thank you. Yeah, I know that Vermont, at least one of the big utilities in Vermont, has this battery program where they will help finance homeowners putting in batteries. with the proviso that during peak demand, the utility can draw from those batteries. And I just wonder if that program has made a dent in any of the peak demand times and if that has been recognized.
All I know is that Vermont functions differently from the rest of the New England states, but I'm not aware that the battery program has been tracked to shave the peak. But I don't know, and I think we have a couple people in Vermont who we could ask to see if they know if that has made a difference in the peak. It is a gorgeous model because we have so many batteries sprinkled across the landscape now that could be engaged in exactly that way and just make all the difference, including all the car batteries that are out there. It's a complicated problem to solve about how to engage all of those, but they have amazing electrical engineers. I'm sure they can solve the problem. But I will ask folks we know in Vermont your question and see if anybody has an answer.
I mean, the program was started with that in mind, specifically to, yeah.
And that, of course, is the goal for the grid in general going forward, is that we would have batteries available. But we don't have good, especially longer term batteries yet on the grid. They're getting started now at long last, but yeah, that's amazing that Vermont is showing what's possible on a small scale now.
Well, this is Susan. I heard Clean Energy New Hampshire 2 years ago talking about how I think in Hawaii people actually sign up to give back some of their electricity during tight times. Can you talk further about that program?
I don't know the details of the Hawaii program, but you saw me saying right. It's because it's clear that it's possible to organize the population to adjust our demand and our usage in response to the moment, whether it's an hour or a week, that it's a problem that other people have already solved. And so we can start doing it in New England, even though the ISO says that they can't. So that's the part that I was saying, right about, but the Hawaii model, I would love to get the details from Clean Energy New Hampshire about that so that I will know the details next time.
Hi, could I ask a question?
Go ahead, Patsy. Sure.
Excuse me. I already have the ISO app, ISO to go app, and I get notifications. It tells me when it's, spiking or whatever. Happens pretty rarely. So I think one day last week, that one of those hot days, it told me it was getting hot and I went and, turned off some lights or whatever. How is what you're doing different from me being on that ISO app, ISO to go app?
Okay, so I would be happy to take a stab at that. So I think that those notifications are all things that you can set yourself to be notified by the app if the prices go above or below a certain level. And so I get those as well. So I get alerts on my app, like if it goes below 0, it goes into the negative, I get those alerts. The grid is now, less than $0 per megawatt hour. And then I get them if it exceeds like $400 a megawatt hour on the reverse side. So they're all settable by the user. So I'm not sure where you have set your alerts. But the other thing I want to say is that I don't think the ISO is, they're giving price alerts. They don't talk about the temperature. They don't talk about the carbon. They don't talk about the pollution. It's all money. It's all price, because their alerts are like, they try to be so strictly like everything they are is about the market. And that's why that's the only information that will be in those alerts. So it may have been hot when you got the alert, but I don't think the ISO to go app is telling you the conditions or the environmental situation that is likely to have that alert. And they're, by the way, they're not telling you ahead of time. They're telling you, you're getting the alert when it's happening, and by that time, it's often really kind of too late to do something. So yeah, those are just a few thoughts.
Thank you.
And I was going to ask, so if I did click the link to sign up to be a peak buster, tell us more exactly about what would happen. So you talked about weekly practices. Right now, is that it? Or would I also get any other alerts when it comes to real peaks? Or like, what's the big picture beyond practicing?
Kendra, would you like to, or like me to?
Oh, why don't you jump in? I don't know how much of your scheme you want to describe this evening.
Yeah. Well, I think that generally what we would love to do is, these are practices you can drop in. You don't have to make every single one from Thursdays to 6:30 to 7, but you'll get to meet other people in these little chats. And then our hope is that because these 60 some peaker plants are distributed throughout, some very rural, some closer to population centers, they're just, scattered throughout New England, that we can get to the point where people could meet each other. And it's like, hey, I'm in the kind of greater New Haven, Connecticut area as well. Like maybe we could get together and try in a concerted fashion to do some peak shaving, some peak busting. And there's value in localizing and distributing our efforts, because the ISO New England operates in what are called load zones, and they're geographically kind of like they're linked, but they are also distinct, and they operate kind of like semi-autonomously. So concerted efforts within load zones, like within New Hampshire, for example, can have a very tangible impact on the operation of the grid in New Hampshire. And so our hope is that, and by distributing our efforts, as well as having kind of like plenary sessions where we're all connected across New England, we have the best of everything, where we can like build our power as a big entity and get bigger, but also to distribute ourselves and build community locally in and around the places where they're polluting neighborhoods, for example. And then to do that and build the capacity to go beyond regular practice and to act nimbly together on, it's not emergency notice, but it's like 24 hours notice. If you can you peak bust in this period tomorrow between 5 and 7 p.m., let's do it. And part of that also is, I think good engineers understand that like you got to build in an excess factor, just like not everyone's going to be able to participate on any given time. Some people are just not going to be able to do it. Other people will. So we'll be able to have each other's backs, when it's time to actually do some peak busting. Kendra, are there things that I forgot that you want to add?
I was just writing in the chat, there were questions about how what we're doing is different from what some utilities are doing. And I see that Eversource, this is the first thing I've seen about Eversource having this demand response program with batteries installed in people's homes. It's fabulous. Lots and lots of people can't yet afford to install a battery in their home, which would mean that they are not able to participate in that. And so part of why we're doing what we're doing is to build the kind of demand response program that anyone can be part of. You don't have to have been able to put in particular infrastructure in your home. And I think that some of that stuff is going to get more expensive in the near future. And so having a low tech way to participate is really important. So it means that anyone anywhere can be part of this and opt in when they're able. But it is exciting to see all the places where demand response possibilities are popping up. You look like you had another thought, Nick.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's great. You just prompted a lot of thoughts. It's very much a both and situation. So demand response peak busting is something that is doing what batteries could and should do, but like it's not like either or, it's both and. If someone's got a battery, go for it. And it's also, if there's a utility program that's doing demand response, we are completely for that. Go for it, do it. I actually had trouble signing up. I'm an Eversource electricity ratepayer. I actually tried to join their connected solutions program for demand response, and I could not do it. I actually really tried. I bought the little Nest thermostat. I tried to hook it up, and I don't want to badmouth them, but it's not as easy as they make it out to be. If you're able to do it, you should do it for sure. The fact that like in California, I mentioned this company is doing it, Ohm Connect, OHM-Connect. They're doing retail demand response. They're like a corporation that's doing this. And so it proves that it can be done. It's like, why don't we have things like that? If what we show is just that we expose the lack of movement by companies or utilities in New England, in a way, that's like doing our job because we're showing like where is the demand response that we should be having here? Why is it in California but not here? So that's part of what we're doing. I would say I'm a little bit reluctant to just be a full-on cheerleader for things like Ohm Connect or the Connected Solutions by Eversource, because I call them the Chuck E. Cheese of demand response. If you sign up for Ohm Connect out in California, what I've seen, you can go on their website, they give you like, the ratepayers get like trinkets. They get little digital badges, they get little, I don't know, coupons here and there. It feels like, I don't know, it just doesn't feel as directly empowering as when we get together collectively and we're deciding to do this. To me, it feels very empowering, even though we're up against a huge corporate ecosystem in the ISO New England and NEPL. There's no doubt about it. They're huge and powerful, and we're kind of like this pesky little, thing, but when we talk about this, people respond, and I just, part of it is this empowering feeling of building our community.
All right, folks, I have the top of the hour, so I'm going to go through some of our upcoming things very quickly. And anybody who wants to stay on the line, we can still stay on the line and chat for a bit, but I do want to officially close the meeting in a minute. Here's some other upcoming things with the New Hampshire Network for Environment, Energy, and Climate. And that is, we have our 4th annual Keep New Hampshire Green Summit on Saturday, August 23rd. Mark your calendars. You can also, if you don't get our mailing, you can put a note in the chat and I can send you some more information on that or sign you up for your mailing list if you're new to the New Hampshire Network. I also want to let you know that we have several different working groups. I chair the municipal energy committees. These are people who have energy committees in your towns. We get together once a month to talk about similar challenges and similar projects. Our next meeting is June 12th, this Thursday at 3 p.m. And then we also have a plastics working group. Their next meeting is June 22nd at 6. And we have a climate working group, and their next meeting is July 1st at 7 p.m. You can find, we have a wealth of information on our website, newhampshirenetwork.org. If you go there, there's a drop down for work committee or working groups, and you can get the meeting URL and the next meeting time, and you can look at the minutes from the last meeting to see if it's something that interests you, that kind of thing. We also try to work at state level legislation. And we have, again, on the website, some bills that are coming up that you may want to comment on or learn more about. And we also have a petition going around asking you to sign this petition, where the plastics working group is going to be going to local grocers and the CEOs of local stores to ask them to use less plastic, most particularly removing free plastic bags. If you want to get involved in that, there's some links here. And lastly, in general, there's a wealth of knowledge at this website, and we invite you to participate as much as you want. Thank you very much. And anybody who wants to stay on to talk some more can. Have a nice night, everybody. All right. Well, nobody's
you.
hanging up. So either they went away and don't know the meeting's over to leave. That happens to me all the time. Or they have more
Thank
questions.
you very much, Mary Beth. That was awesome. Very, very well. Nicely done. And thank you, Nathan and Kendra, Rev Kendra,
Yeah.
for being with us. It's great to have the best experts around with us. So thank you.
And Sarah had to leave early. She gave a nice thank you.
Thank you all. It was great to see there was like 20 people on the call, right? That was really well attended.
Mhm.
And I think our recordings get traffic. So more people will get the information later, and we can, Mary Beth, I assume you'll put in all the links for people to follow up.
Yes, indeed.
I can send you all those links in a document.
Oh, that would be great, Kendra. Yeah, that would
Yeah.
be great.
Signing up for the consumer liaison group meetings, you can't actually sign up with the ISO now, so it's a little. We can just make sure you get that sign up when it goes live in August, and you can
Right,
email,
right.
send it out with your newsletter then. Great.
Mhm.
Now
Okay.
it's after 1 o'clock in the morning for me, so I think what I'll do is Mary Beth, I'm going to make you host so
Oh, we're
that you
still
can.
recorded. We're still recorded.
We're still recording.
Yeah, you
Okay,
can
yeah.
stop recording here and make me host, and if there's anything else worthwhile, I'll record the rest, but we got the bulk of it.
Thank you. Staying up until 1 a.m.
And you know what? We should let Nathan and Kendra go, I guess, because Nathan's probably either on vacation or some kind of business trip, and Kendra's got a business retreat that she's on. So,
Well, we're delighted to get to talk with you all, and I just so appreciate the questions and the information that you brought to this conversation. Thank you.
The chat is very full of a lot of information
yes,
in the chat.
and the chat gets saved, so.
Happy
All
to
right,
follow up.
everybody then. Take care.
Take
Have a
care,
nice
Thank you so
evening.
much.
I'll head out
Bye.
too.
Bye-bye.